The first explosion sounded like the sky tearing open. The cabin lights flickered, oxygen masks dropped like pale ghosts from the ceiling, and the right engine burned in a spiral of orange outside the window. In row 8, a quiet single dad tightened his grip on his daughter's tiny hand while strangers screamed and prayed around him. Then, over the chaos, a trembling voice from the cockpit asked a question no passenger expected to hear at 30,000 feet. Did anyone on board have a military call sign? Before this story unfolds, take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, Kindness Stories, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the hidden heroes who sit quietly among us every day. Ethan Cole had never liked attention. He preferred the aisle seat, the quiet corner, the unnoticed exit. At 38, with soft brown eyes that carried permanent fatigue and hands rough from years of work, he looked like any other tired father trying to hold life together. His dark hair was cut short, almost carelessly, and a faint scar traced along his jawline, half hidden by the shadow of a day's stubble. He wore a simple gray hoodie, worn jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days. Beside him sat his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, small and bright-eyed, her curly chestnut hair tied in a slightly uneven ponytail he had learned to make through YouTube tutorials. She clutched a stuffed rabbit missing one ear, her world contained in its stitched smile. They were flying home after visiting Lily's grandmother. It had been a hard year. Lily's mother had passed away 18 months earlier after a sudden illness that ripped through their lives without warning. Since then, Ethan had been mother and father, bedtime storyteller and lunch packer, hair braider and nightmare chaser. He worked nights as a mechanic and days as whatever Lily needed him to be. Exhaustion lived in his bones, but so did a fierce, quiet love. The flight had been ordinary until it wasn't. Outside, the engine flamed. The smell of smoke crept into the cabin, thin but unmistakable. A baby cried 3 rows back. A man shouted that they were going down. Oxygen masks swayed, and the flight attendants moved with strained calm, their eyes betraying the storm inside them. Then the intercom cracked alive. The captain's voice was controlled but tight, explaining an engine failure, explaining procedures, explaining nothing that calmed the terror in the air. Moments later, a different voice, lower and less steady, cut through. It asked if there was anyone on board with military aviation experience. It asked for a call sign. Ethan closed his eyes. He had buried that part of himself years ago. Before Lily. Before marriage. Before the funeral. Before the silence that followed. There had been another life, one filled with roaring engines, sky-splitting speed, and a name spoken over radios instead of birth certificates. In that life, he wasn't just Ethan. He had been known by a call sign that once echoed through training fields and combat simulations. He had walked away from it after an accident that cost him more than he admitted. He chose family over flight, love over altitude. He never looked back. Until now. The intercom repeated the request. Fighter pilots asked for your call sign, it said, if you can hear this. His heart pounded, not with fear of dying, but with fear of stepping forward again into a world he had sworn to leave. Lily looked up at him, her eyes wide but searching his face for instruction on how to feel. He forced a gentle smile and brushed her curls back. He unbuckled his seatbelt. The walk to the cockpit felt longer than any runway he had ever known. Passengers stared, some with desperate hope, others with disbelief. He didn't look at them. He knocked on the cockpit door, announced himself quietly, and when it opened, the smell of burnt fuel and stress hit him full force. Inside, the captain and first officer were battling alarms, warning lights.